The Grand Hall of Harmony shimmered under artificial starlight, an architectural marvel suspended in low orbit above the neutral world of Caltharus Prime. Delegates from 100 species filled the chamber, dressed in ceremonial attire, draped in silks, armor, feathers, or scales, depending on their origin. Peace banners fluttered with soft breeze emitters, and a choir of ethereal tones played from translucent instruments in the ceiling. It was supposed to be a celebration, a demonstration of unity between the Galactic Federation and the younger human colonies newly accepted into the interstellar fold. That unity shattered in a single moment. Among the small crowd of human civilians was a boy, maybe 6 years old, brown-haired, bright-eyed, dressed in a miniature version of the diplomatic uniform worn by his mother, Ambassador Lorene Holt. He wandered slightly away from the human delegation, captivated by the way some alien diplomats shimmered or hovered or glowed. He wasn't the first child to explore curiously, and most species found it charming. Commander Vrexil of the Tharn did not. She stood tall, 8 feet of coiled muscle, her skin dark green with golden ridges, ceremonial blade strapped to her back. As head of security for the summit, she had taken her role with rigid pride. When a human child brushed lightly against her leg while pointing at a floating delegate, Vrexil reacted instinctively. Her clawed hand lashed out and struck the child across the face. The crack of the blow echoed louder than any anthem. Gasps erupted. The boy crumpled to the ground, unconscious, blood streaming from a gash above his temple. For one long moment, no one moved. Then screaming began. Ambassador Holt shoved past stunned onlookers and dropped to her knees beside her son. Her shaking hands cradled his small, limp form. Around her, the other humans stood frozen, faces pale with disbelief, some trembling with rage. He intruded into my space, Vrexil said coldly, arms folded. It was a disciplinary gesture. That is standard protocol where I'm from. Her words made the silence louder. The council guards arrived late, reacting more to the panic than the incident. Medical drones hovered in, scanning the boy. He lived, but barely. Media orbs recorded everything. Within minutes, the footage spread across the galaxy. A Tharn officer striking a human child, followed by the council's stunned inaction. Back on Earth and across human colonies, the reaction was immediate and visceral. News feeds howled. Politicians fumbled to issue statements. Protesters flooded Federation outposts, but not the Deathworlders. They said nothing. The Deathworlders, humans born or trained on the most violent and unforgiving planets, watched the footage in silence. No speeches, no threats, just quiet, burning focus. Among them was Captain Daria Voss, a veteran of the Crithan Front. She watched the clip alone in her quarters on Terra Nova, her expression unreadable. Her armor hung beside her, scratched and scorched from a dozen campaigns. The scar along her jaw ached, as if sensing what was coming. A soft knock came at her door. She opened it to see 3 others. Jacob Brick, Elson, Sniper, Rima Kwan, ex-Black Ops, and Makalov Demolitions, each one hardened by Deathworld survival. They said nothing. They didn't have to. Daria nodded once. Gear up. They didn't seek approval. There would be no authorization, no signatures, no delays. Because among Deathworlders, one rule was older than any law. You do not hurt a child. And if you do, you don't get to run. You don't get to explain. You only get one thing. Consequences. 3 days after the incident, the Galactic Council chamber was flooded with arguments and bureaucracy. Protests from human diplomats, vague apologies from Tharn representatives, and useless discussions about cultural misunderstanding clogged the air like smoke. The child, Elias Holt, still lay unconscious in a medical bay on Caltharus Prime. The Tharn delegation had not issued a formal apology, and Commander Vrexil had vanished. No official records indicated her departure. No transport logs showed her leaving the station. But whispers traveled faster than data, especially in the darker corners of space. According to a hidden relay intercepted by the Deathworlders, Vrexil was extracted by a Tharn War frigate hours after the incident and taken to a secure military outpost on the moon of Zarkal 3, far outside neutral territory. They were hiding her, and the Deathworlders were already in motion. Inside the belly of a black ops corvette called Silent Mercy, Captain Daria Voss reviewed holographic layouts of the Tharn installation. Sparse satellite coverage, automated turret defense grid, one platoon of soldiers. No civilians, no diplomats, no council oversight. Beautiful, whispered Rima Kwan, studying the base. Isolated, no witnesses, and not a soul who'll miss them. Jacob Brick, Elson stood leaning against a steel beam, loading custom armor-piercing rounds into a compact rail rifle. We go quiet, in and out. Daria shook her head. No, we go loud. They want this buried. We'll carve into the galaxy's memory. Makalov grinned, already prepping the breaching charges. They launched during the Zarkal system's shadow rotation. Silent Mercy slipping through the planet's radiation belt, cloaked against detection. Inside, each Deathworlder moved with focus born from countless battles. This wasn't just another mission. This was family. The Tharn base was efficient, cold, militarized. Turrets scanned the perimeter lazily, unaware of the predators creeping through the snow-laced terrain below. The Deathworlders reached the outer wall without triggering a single alert, until Makalov detonated the east gate. The explosion lit the sky, and before the smoke cleared, Daria and Rima were inside, cutting through the first wave of defenders with brutal speed. Non-lethal when possible, limb shots, knockout darts, concussive blasts, but only when possible. Jacob took up a sniper nest overlooking the central building. How about eyes on her? Second floor. Watching a broadcast like none of this matters. Daria's voice was a growl. Cut her off. We're coming up. The Tharn defenders regrouped quickly, but not quick enough. Deathworlders moved like apex predators unleashed. They turned the Tharn's discipline into a liability, using unpredictability as a weapon. When they reached Vrexil's chamber, she stood waiting in a gilded officer's uniform, unarmed but defiant. You violate every treaty by being here, she hissed. You'll bring war to your kind. Daria stepped forward slowly, her voice flat. You struck a child. I enforced order. You broke something sacred, Daria said, drawing a curved blade from her belt. Now we break you. Vrexil's eyes finally showed fear. She tried to run. She didn't make it past the doorway. Afterward, the Deathworlders moved with eerie calm. They cleared the base of weapons logs, erased themselves from surveillance, and ensured the rest of the Tharn were restrained, alive, but thoroughly humiliated. Then, Rima approached with a sealed ceremonial case, the kind used by ambassadors to deliver sacred artifacts to the Council. Makalov carefully placed the severed head of Commander Vrexil inside, her expression still frozen in the last moment of horror. Daria closed the lid. This isn't revenge, she said. It's a message. Think they'll get it? Brick asked. They'd better, Rima muttered. Because next time, we don't stop with just one. In the silence of space, Silent Mercy vanished once more, carrying with it a message the galaxy could never ignore. The Galactic Council chamber, towering and ornate, had never known true silence until now. Delegates from across the stars filled the vast hall. The platform buzzed earlier with posturing speeches, legal loopholes, and flimsy resolutions over the human incident. Half the species had condemned the Tharn's brutality. The other half waved it off with calls for context. But all of that stopped when the humans walked in. There were no announcements. No guards attempted to halt them. The air simply shifted, tension folding in like a coming storm. For Deathworlders strode up the center aisle, dressed not in formal robes or diplomatic attire, but in combat gear dusted with frost and blood. At their head was Captain Daria Voss. Her presence alone was enough to silence the room. Behind her, Rima Kwan carried a sealed black case, its sides engraved with human military insignias and council diplomatic markings. They reached the council dais. Voss stopped, raised her eyes, and looked directly at the seated Tharn delegation. Then she placed the container, deliberately, on the speaker's pedestal. Captain Voss, a reptilian council member, rasped, his voice trembling. What is this? Rima stepped forward. With cold precision, she unlatched the case. Gasps. Screams. One delegate from the aquatic Tharn collapsed on the floor. Even the most battle-hardened among them recoiled at the sight of Commander Vrexil's severed head, eyes still wide in frozen terror. Silence fell again, heavier now. Daria's voice broke it like a hammer. You struck a human child. You left him bleeding in front of the entire galaxy. And then you ran. She turned slowly, addressing every corner of the chamber. You think humans are fragile, soft, new. You forget we come from Deathworlds, planets that burn and freeze and kill anything that hesitates. And those of us who survive, we don't forget who we are. Her eyes locked with the Tharn ambassador, who trembled despite his hardened scales. Vrexil made a choice. So did we. She was an officer of a sovereign power, someone cried out. You executed her without trial. She wasn't executed, Remus said darkly. She was removed, permanently, like any threat to a child should be. Another voice, a high-pitched one from a winged species, spoke cautiously. This is not justice. This is vengeance. Daria nodded. You're absolutely right. The admission shocked them. But she didn't stop. We did not come here to seek your approval. We came to deliver a promise. She gestured to the head. This is what happens when you harm one of ours. We've upheld the treaties, a Tharn delegate snapped. Your methods violate every interstellar law. Brick Elson stepped forward. So did hers. So did hiding her. So did silence while a human child fought for his life. The council chamber dissolved into chaos. Alien languages overlapping, shouts of outrage and fear. But none dared touch the case. None tried to arrest the Deathworlders. Even the guards at the edge of the chamber stared at them like they were staring at a new species entirely. Not diplomats. Not soldiers. Something worse. Something ancient. Daria turned to leave, but paused at the steps. She looked over her shoulder, voice low but clear. Let be known, we will never strike first. But if you come for our young, our civilians, our wounded, you will never get the chance to do it again. With that, the four Deathworlders walked away, leaving only silence and a severed truth behind them. That night, across the galaxy, the footage of the council scene leaked, just as the original incident had. Billions watched as the humans, once dismissed as latecomers to the stars, delivered a brutal answer to cruelty. Social feeds exploded. News networks froze in shock. Military strategists rewrote protocols. And somewhere in a dim hospital room on Caltharus Prime, Elias Holt stirred from unconsciousness. His mother wept, not just from joy, but because she now knew her son would never be unprotected again. In the days that followed, the Galactic Council tried desperately to restore the illusion of control. Meetings were called. Emergency sessions convened. Carefully worded condemnations were drafted, softened, revised, and ultimately discarded. Behind closed doors, leaders whispered of ancient human tales, of wolves and vengeance and Earth's unforgiving lands. The Tharn Empire, once proud and defiant, went silent. There were no retaliation strikes, no counterstatements, no diplomatic bluster. Commander Vrexil's death had sent a clear message, and not even their warmongering pride could mask the truth. The humans were not to be tested. Among the younger species, fear turned to respect. Among the older ones, those who remembered war before peace treaties, there was a quiet nod of recognition. The Deathworlders had not asked for war, but they had reminded everyone what happens when you bring war to them. On Earth, a bronze statue was erected outside the Galactic Embassy in Geneva, a kneeling Deathworlder soldier offering a protective hand over a child. No weapons, no blood, just a simple, eternal vow. At its base, the inscription read, "We were forged in fire. We protect our own." Elsewhere, smaller memorials appeared across the colonies. Murals in Martian shelters, tributes on orbital stations, and candles lit in domes on Europa. The child, Elias Holt, was recovering. His name was never forgotten, but the story had become larger than one boy. It became a warning, a vow, a line in the stars no one would dare cross again. Deep within the Deathworlder command bunker on Terra Nova, Captain Daria Voss stood alone before a wide viewport. staring at the swirling nebula beyond. Her armor was cleaned, her weapons stored. There were no medals for what she had done. No ceremonies. No orders. That was fine. She hadn't done it for recognition. Footsteps behind her. "Permission to enter?" asked a soft voice. She turned to see Ambassador Lorene Holt, Elias's mother. Eyes tired, shoulders still tense, but her hands were steady. "You don't need permission," Darius said, stepping aside. They stood in silence for a moment, both looking out at the stars. Then Lorene spoke. "Why didn't you wait? File protest? Let the council handle it." Darius' voice was low. "Calm. Because they would have buried it. They would have negotiated her punishment down to a fine and a transfer. Maybe called it a cultural misunderstanding." She paused. "And because children don't heal properly when they think no one will protect them." Lorene nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. "He asks about you sometimes. He knows what you did. I don't want him to. He should," Lorene said, voice firmer now. "He should know what kind of people are willing to stand for him. What kind of protector he might become." That made Darius smile just a little. Lorene placed something in her hand. A small pendant, a child's drawing etched into crystal. A stick-figure woman holding a shield, with a tiny child behind her. "He made it," Lorene said. Said he wanted to give it to the lady with fire in her eyes. Daria closed her hand around it, and for the first time in weeks, the tension in her jaw eased. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, a new protocol was passed unanimously. The Children's Accord, a binding interstellar law that declared harm to civilians, especially minors, as an act of war punishable without diplomatic immunity. Drafted by the human delegation. Endorsed by every species, including the Tharn. No one argued. No one hesitated. The lesson had been written in blood, delivered by warriors born from Deathworlds, and placed, without apology, at the Council's feet. Final scene. In a quiet school on Luna, a young alien child nudged her human classmate and asked, "Is it true your people fought over one boy?" The human smiled gently. "No, not over him." She pointed to a quote etched on the classroom wall, beneath a painting of the Deathworlders. "We fight for every child,